By the mid-1960s, Martin Luther King Jr. was the most powerful civil rights figure in the country, having led the Montgomery bus boycott, the nonviolent protests in Birmingham, and the massive march on Washington. Yet as King's stature grew, so too did FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover's efforts to stop him. Perhaps the most notorious example of all is the scathing letter sent to King on this day in 1964.
What is more dangerous than a law enforcement agency of a free government attempting to interfere with the political processes of this country, even considering alternatives to displace King as the chosen leader of his own movement, and going further still to attempt to discredit him and harass him in every petty way imaginable.
Nearly a decade after Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated, a Senate Intelligence Committee report confirmed his suspicion that the anonymous suicide letter sent to him in 1964 came from J. Edgar Hoover's FBI, although it was written in the voice of a disillusioned follower. "You know you are a complete fraud and a great liability to all of us Negroes," the letter read. "Clearly you don't believe in any personal moral principles." The missive went on to call King evil and an abnormal animal and allude to his extramarital affairs. It was accompanied by an audio tape, an alleged recording of King's sexual orgies and adulterous acts. "Lend your sexually psychotic ear to the enclosure," the letter demanded. It ended with a not-so-veiled threat. "There is only one thing left for you to do. You know what it is," the author warned, before giving King 34 days to take it before your filthy, abnormal, fraudulent self is bared to the nation.
We know that J. Edgar Hoover was telling Dr. King to kill himself. We know that. And we know all the activity around this was coordinated by the FBI.
It was the most vicious move yet in Hoover's concerted efforts to derail King.
They were so hostile toward him and saw him as such a threat.
Especially after the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom in August 1963, when King delivered his monumental "I Have a Dream" speech. An FBI memo afterwards called King the most dangerous and effective Negro leader in the country, and Hoover was set on proving King was a communist and therefore a threat to national security.
That was the claim that the FBI made. So they did a range of things. They did a lot of wiretaps. By 1964 and afterwards, it was probably unlikely that King ever had a single phone conversation that was not being intercepted by the FBI. Even in-person meetings were being listened to, usually because bugs would be placed in the room, or maybe someone who was working for the FBI as an informant would be in the meeting.
By the time one of Hoover's deputies wrote the anonymous letter to King, the FBI had amassed an extensive file.
The file on Martin Luther King contained mostly information about his sexual activities. There would be stories, for example, about an alleged orgy that took place, as I recall, on the 13th floor of a hotel in New York City. I remember that incident, alleged incident.
As it turned out, King didn't see the blackmail package until he returned from Oslo, Norway, where, on December 10th, 1964, he was given the Nobel Peace Prize. In fact, it was King's wife, Coretta Scott King, who eventually opened it.
And she listens to it, and she recognizes her husband's voice on the recording. And as they had hoped, this created an incredible strain for him. Of course, King immediately denied what had happened and said it was not he, but his wife knew that it was.
In any case, King never discussed the letter publicly, and the media never picked up the story. Instead, he went on to spearhead the fight to overcome legal barriers at the state and local levels that prevented many blacks in the South from registering to vote. It was a battle that ended in victory with the passage of the Voting Rights Act, signed into law by President Lyndon Johnson in August 1965. Still, Hoover continued to escalate his campaign against the civil rights leader as part of the FBI's cointelpro, or counterintelligence program.
By the time you get to the last years of King's life, particularly 1968, the scale of pressure that's on him is so great because the point of counterintelligence was to destroy people and their lives.
But half a century after Martin Luther King's death, he stands as an enduring symbol of courage and dignity, while Hoover, who died in 1972, left a legacy that is controversial at best.
From dancer to Oscar winner,